something that struck me was that I couldn't believe is how do people in Ireland have on average only a third of the tinnitus patients than in Romania? How does that fit in? Because everyone would say, oh, the Irish, they're drinking and smoking the whole time. How can it be that they have such a low penetration of tinnitus sufferers? Is there anything that you can think of?
Hello and welcome, everyone. This is Frida here, and you're listening to the OUTRING TINNITUS podcast. I'm very glad to welcome you all today to my second episode, and which is, as promised, the interview with the scientist Professor Silvano Gallus from the Mario Negri Institute in Italy. And Professor Gallus is a tinnitus researcher who does epidemiological studies on tinnitus. So he researches the extent to which tinnitus exists in the population, but also predicting factors and contributing factors and health risk that are concurring to tinnitus. And today I would like to present you with the interview that I conducted with him last week. And I think there are some very, very interesting insights in this interview, but hear for yourself. So here he is. Without further ado, first we have the intro, and then we dive right into it. The episode with Silvano Gallus on the OUTRING TINNITUS podcast. Enjoy. Hello and welcome to the OUTRING TINNITUS podcast. This is Frieder, and I'm your host. This podcast is all about how you can outring your tinnitus and live a better life despite the ringing.
Thank you very much for taking the time for our small interview today.
Great. I'm glad to be here.
I would like to welcome you very much here to the Tinnitus Talk podcast. I'm very happy that you're my very first interview guest. And for me, it's very exciting, as one of my main goals with this podcast is to educate the people who suffer from tinnitus, or also their friends and their family and environment, in order to create a better perspective for the people who suffer from tinnitus, so that they can understand a bit more what it actually means to suffer from tinnitus and what we can do with people who suffer from tinnitus and what we cannot do. So I'm super happy that you're here today, and would like to let you introduce yourself a bit.
I'm Silvano Gallus. I work in Mario Negri Institute, where I lead the laboratory, of lifestyle epidemiology. I work in Mario Negri Institute in this field of epidemiology since 1997. Therefore, it's 23 years I'm involved in epidemiology. My background is computer science, actually. I have a degree in computer science, but then I started working as a biostatistician here in 1997, and then I became an epidemiologist. First of all, I would like to define the epidemiology, because it is not so clear to everybody, and therefore it is important to understand that epidemiology is the branch of medicine dealing with the incidence, the frequency, let's say, the distribution and the causes, and also the progress of the diseases. And therefore, the epidemiology of tinnitus deals with the distribution of tinnitus, the frequency of tinnitus in the world, and therefore also the burden of tinnitus, and in particular also the causes of tinnitus. And therefore our main focus is based on the risk factors associated with tinnitus, the determinants of tinnitus. I'm also honorary associate professor at the University of Nottingham, where there is an important center doing a lot of important researches on tinnitus. And this is my introduction, let's say.
Okay. Well, thank you very much. That's a very, very nice introduction. And I think this is also, thank you again for being here so much, because I think this is the perfect way to start a tinnitus podcast. I have the first episode that came out last week, which is basically just about me. And now I have the second episode, which will be you laying basically the groundwork and the ground things and epidemiological aspects of tinnitus. And I think that's a great way to start a podcast. So I'm super happy that this turned out this way. And maybe I want to leave this completely open to you. And we said that we can keep the conversation open a bit. But is there? Why did you get into tinnitus? Why did you decide to study tinnitus?
Well, it was not by chance, actually.
Okay.
I started dealing with tinnitus in June 2013, when the director of my institute, the former director of my institute, who was also the founder of the whole institute, actually 60 years ago, something like that, and therefore he is 92 now, 91 wow. Maybe now, but he was the director of my institute in 2013, and he asked me to help to start to contact the president of the Italian Association on Tinnitus, which is an association of tinnitus patients, in order to help them to conduct a study, an epidemiological study, in order to describe various cases. And since the beginning, I contacted Ottorino Savani, Sir Ottorino Savani, who is the president of this association, and is also a tinnitus patient. And when I studied the tinnitus, and when I started looking at what tinnitus was, because actually I didn't even know exactly what tinnitus was in 2013 exactly. And therefore I understood that the tinnitus patients needed something more than just the conduction of a study, but it was important that some of us had to deal and to contribute a lot to improve the epidemiology of tinnitus. Yeah. This is the point, and therefore I started working on tinnitus, and several steps forward have been done since that June in 2013.
Yeah. Do you know someone close to yourself who has tinnitus, or do you maybe have tinnitus yourself?
I don't have tinnitus, fortunately, and I didn't know, not even before 2013, I didn't know anyone with tinnitus.
Oh, wow.
Or maybe someone, but then actually after dealing with tinnitus, a number of people came to me to say, well, I suffer of tinnitus, I suffer maybe a mild, not a severe form of tinnitus, but a number of people very close to me, they were suffering tinnitus. Also several colleagues of mine. And after 2013, I started knowing and meeting a lot of people with also severe forms of tinnitus, and I understand their suffering, and they suffer a lot. This is
Yeah, I guess that is something that's very common in tinnitus, right? Like we don't know anything about it unless someone really like either suffers very much, or there is like a direct a connection or something, or someone knew that you were studying tinnitus or the epidemiological aspects of tinnitus, and before you didn't know that this person even has tinnitus, because I don't think people often don't talk about it, like they are very, like they turn to themselves in order to deal with the tinnitus instead of like talking about it, because like hearing is still way more stigmatized than vision, for example, right? When I have a problem with my vision, I just wear glasses or I wear contact lenses.
Sure,
but when I have a problem with my ears, then it's already stigmatized. Oh, you're an old grandpa, you need a hearing aid, and things like that. Yeah, that's very, 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 very true.
Yes, very. Well,
yeah.
I already knew what tinnitus more or less was. Actually, in Italy, we have two different ways to define tinnitus. Okay. One is tinnito, which comes from the Latin, and one is acufene. And therefore, this is already
same in Spanish. Yeah.
Yes. And but however, I didn't know if it was a disease, a symptoms, a symptom. I didn't know this, and but then I understood that tinnitus at the end is a symptom of a concomitant neurological disorder. This is what I understood.
Great. Now, I think maybe it would be a good time if you wanted to talk a bit about the study results. And I contacted you, and this is what I forgot to say in the introduction, because I was at the Tinnitus Symposium at Charité Berlin here in December last year. And that's where I saw your lecture, which I thought was really, really interesting, because I love getting a big picture. And there were some really, really nice hard facts about the number of people in Europe suffering from tinnitus. I think you said it's about 70 million or 7 million? 75 million people. Wow. Yeah. What a number, eh? Wow.
In Europe. This is just in Europe.
Alone. Yeah.
Alone, yes.
Yeah.
Yes, actually, we work in. I mean, when I talk about we, it is my laboratory, and for myself, my team. We work. We have one line of research on tinnitus. Mm-hmm. Must confess that my main line of research includes tobacco control, obesity control, and alcohol control. But since 2013, we started this new line of research, and now it is a very important line of research of ours. And we are now coordinating multiple epidemiological studies, mainly aimed to quantify the association between several different risk factors and tinnitus, or quantifying the burden of tinnitus in Europe. And for these two main topics, we are conducting, or we have already conducted, several different studies. In particular, we conducted a European tinnitus survey in 12 European countries, where we wanted to understand the prevalence and for the burden of the disease, the prevalence of this condition using a standardized assessment tool. And we already conducted this survey, and now we are drafting the manuscripts to be submitted in scientific journals, in peer-reviewed journals. Then we are conducting a systematic review of the literature on various risk factors for tinnitus, and we also are conducting a case control study, which is a type of study of epidemiological study. It is an important type of epidemiological study on risk factors of tinnitus. We already enrolled approximately 200 cases with the incident tinnitus and 200 controls in northern Italy, and we want, our goal is to obtain 600 cases and 600 controls in order to understand which are the main risk factors for tinnitus in Italy. And we also are analyzing Swedish cohort data that are prospective longitudinal studies, and in collaboration with the Karolinska Institute, also in order to understand which is to quantify the association between several risk factors for tinnitus. We are involved in several different projects that are mainly supported by the European Commission. In particular, we are involved in the Innovative Training Network ESIT project, which is a project where a number of researchers are training 15 PhD students that who will be the future experts on tinnitus in Europe, and therefore we are training them on various disciplines of tinnitus. On tinnitus, I'm contributing with the epidemiology of tinnitus, obviously, and I'm helping a student to correctly interpret the data from our studies, epidemiological studies. Then we are involved also in the GenderNet Tiger project, which is a project we are conducting in collaboration with the Karolinska Institute, with Christopher Cederroth, with Granada University, and Antonio Lopez Escamez, and with Bergen University, Jan Bulla is the researcher.
Just to say in between for the people who are listening, these are quite some big names in tinnitus research, right? Like if you have, so to say, the pro league of tinnitus research, that is so to say the Premier League of tinnitus research.
Yes, of course. Well, yes, it's true. It's true. They are the big names.
Names, yeah, for sure, exactly. for sure.
And in this project, in this specific project, we are trying to understand which is the combined role of genetic and environmental risk factors, with a focus on differences by gender, and therefore we will stratify various findings by sex in order to understand if there are differences by sex. And now we started the new project. There was just a kickoff meeting just a couple of weeks ago in Athens. It is the Unity project, where we are conducting an important clinical trial in order to see the effect of a combination of different treatments. These are the main projects where we are involved, and by now we already have some preliminary findings. I can share. Let's say,
nice.
We in the European survey, we found that in Europe, overall prevalence of tinnitus is around 15%, ranging from 9% in Ireland to 28% in Bulgaria. And the prevalence of severe tinnitus exceeds 1%, and therefore it is 1.2%. If we generalize this finding, this proportion, this prevalence to the adult European population, we can talk about 75 million adults that suffer of tinnitus, and more than 5 million adults suffering in a severe form.
That's a lot of people. That is a lot of people, and 15% seems to be like the rate pretty much. I think in the US it says also about 15% of adults, and that seems to be like quite the number,
yes.
right?
This is this finding was in broad agreement with the current evidence on tinnitus prevalence. Therefore, we can confirm other studies that have been conducted so far. Our main strength in that study was the fact that we had a standardized assessment tool that allowed us to compare the results in various countries. The other aspects we found in this research is that tinnitus was similar in men and women and increased with increasing age, as it is well known, and that the hearing difficulty is really strongly related with. So these were the most important findings of that study. We are also conducting, as I already mentioned, this systematic review of the literature, where we decided to try to understand the risk factors already analyzed in the scientific literature, and therefore we conducted this systematic review of the scientific literature in order to understand which is the current evidence on the causes of tinnitus. And we found something like 380 papers published on this issue, which is a good number, but the main problem is that the large majority of these studies were cross-sectional studies. This is a study design which has several limitations inherent to the study design. These limitations do not allow researchers not even to understand if there is a causal association, but only they can observe only relationship between risk factors and tinnitus. And this is a problem, and there are in particular two types of designs, which are case control studies and core studies, that are able to understand if there is a causal path, and there is they are able to analyze the issue properly. But only less than 10% of the studies published so far are based on these types of epidemiological studies. And in particular, we found only less than 20 studies providing a measure of association, like a relative risk, from case control and core studies. Therefore, we acknowledge a large evidence gap, a large gap of knowledge, and that should be filled very soon. And we are contributing to fill this knowledge gap with our studies and with our analysis.
I think that's very, I mean, as we discussed before already, if you have to find out that there is a knowledge gap and to then later on fill it with new questions and sort of like new sort of research that's coming up was also something that I studied at Maastricht University myself in my bachelor's, and we always had problem-based learning. So throughout the course in the university, we would find something that would be a question, and we would take it home and then answer it afterwards. So if you basically find out through reviewing these cohorts and these studies that there is much more evidence needed, that's a great first finding, right? And something that struck me was that I couldn't believe is that, and this I have to ask. I mean, it might sound a bit like stereotypical, but how do people in Ireland have on average only a third of the tinnitus patients than in Romania? How does that fit in? Because everyone would say, oh, the Irish, they're drinking and smoking the whole time. How can it be that they have such a low penetration of tinnitus sufferers? Is there anything that you can think of?
This is a very good question. We do not have yet the answer. This is the main problem.
Yeah.
This is true. We have found several differences in terms of tinnitus prevalence between countries, and we want to understand why there are such differences.
Yeah.
This is due to the assessment method, but it is not the assessment tool that bias the results. This is not true because we use the standardized methodology, and therefore there should be some determinants of tinnitus that are different in various countries, and we need to understand why, also in order not only to prevent tinnitus, but also to provide some hypotheses to be tested for tinnitus patients in order to obtain new hypotheses to solve the problem of tinnitus in a way.
Yeah. I mean, one of the biggest things that you say, that's also one of the biggest links that you could identify, is that tinnitus is always causally very much linked with hearing loss, right? So yes. I guess one of the biggest things that we all, the people who already have tinnitus, like me, and the people who do not have tinnitus yet, like you, in order not to make it worse for me, in order not to start suffering from tinnitus for you, the best bet that we have is to protect our hearing. Would you agree with that?
This is absolutely correct, of course. Yes.
Okay. And would you also say, or is there a certain hypothesis that tinnitus is increasing throughout the last 50 years? Let's say maybe is there something that you think this could have happened because we live in an overall much more louder society and our cities are much more filled? And I know when I go to Italy, it's very normal that everyone's honking the whole time. And here in Germany, the people shout at each other, and like the cities get much louder, right?
Yes, absolutely. There are some studies showing that tinnitus is increasing, although it is not so easy to investigate this issue, because we find several differences in terms of tinnitus prevalence, also in the same country in the same year. Just because the assessment tool is different, for example, just because the population is different, and therefore it is very difficult to understand if tinnitus is increasing or not. But however, the current evidence suggests that this is an increasing symptom at the end, that it is growing and growing, the burden of this symptom. Well, then there is obviously also the aging of the population, because the population, particularly in Europe, is growing, and given that tinnitus is more frequent in the elderly, it is obvious that the burden of this symptom, of this condition, is increasing.
Yeah. I can always. I used to be a normal a teenager as well, and I was born deaf on one ear already, and I have a small hearing aid for 8 years already on my right ear, and I as a teenager I also used to walk around with a normal Apple earpods in, and when you're in the train or in the subway, you just turn it louder, because I mean the general volume goes up. So you just need to lift your music a bit more, and suddenly you're at 90, 92 decibels, and you do that a few hours a day, and but people don't know that, and that's the thing where that's something that I also want to contribute with this podcast to create awareness around this issue. And that's why I think that's so great to have scientists such as you, who are very experienced in the field and who look at the aspects and of what kind of factors could contribute to people developing tinnitus. And so I'm very, very thankful for that. Is there I guess there is a very interesting link for the European tinnitus research and the European tinnitus research project. Is there anything in particular that you think is very promising in the next few months or years that you're very hopeful about in your research? Is there one project that you particularly like, maybe, or something? Or
no. Well, there are some strengths in the research on tinnitus that should be mentioned. First of all, there are several researchers, very good research, outstanding researchers that are focusing their research on tinnitus. And this is extremely important. And the interest on tinnitus is growing and growing. In particular, I want to mention two centers. In Europe, we have the Regensburg Center, the Regensburg University, with Bertolt Langut and Winfried Schlee, who this center is an outstanding center in Europe. And then we have also at the University of Nottingham an important center with David Begoli and Deborah Hall. And these centers are increasing the chance to find at the end a treatment, a solution to tinnitus. There are several other centers and the universities and the institutes that are working on tinnitus. And in my opinion, it is extremely important to talk about tinnitus, to understand which is the burden of tinnitus. Tinnitus has been always neglected as a condition, in my opinion, because it is the assessment is self-reported. For example, there is not a measurement by biomarkers and so on that could be used to assess tinnitus, and this is another a difficulty also for the policymaker. And however, it is important that the interest on tinnitus from policymakers also, and the public community also, that this interest increases. And for this reason, I believe it is very important what you are doing, and I thank you, because it is important to disseminate also findings from the scientific research. So thank you for what you are doing. And my main goal is to let policymakers understand that this condition, tinnitus, has a huge burden, in particular in Europe, and therefore they should deal with the tinnitus. They should also spend money on tinnitus, spend money for the research on tinnitus, because only from the research we will obtain evidence-based treatments for tinnitus patients. This is the main limitation. We do not have a single treatment or the treatment to cure tinnitus by now, and we need to work a lot in order to obtain a cure for tinnitus.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think everyone who's listening and everyone who has tinnitus or who has friends or family around who have tinnitus are extremely grateful that people such as you are devoting their science and their brain power in finding out more about this very, very widespread disease, right? And I think it's especially important because most of the time, well, if people have, let's say, at least a medium intensity tinnitus, most of them also start suffering from other conditions, right? Like it's not just tinnitus. It's after tinnitus comes the sleep loss. Like people are sleep deprived. Then after that, they can't perform at work properly anymore. After that comes the burnout, the family problems, the isolation, and in the worst case, we know that hearing loss, also tinnitus, are linked, but also later on early stages of dementia, right? So this is something, tinnitus is an early warning indicator for us to do something in our society to A, reduce the noise, B, also protect our hearing, and C, find accurate treatment opportunities for the people who are dealing or who have been suffering or who are suffering from this condition.
Absolutely, you are completely right. And for this reason, we need to work on tinnitus. The scientific community should stop and start working on it. And this is more or less what I understood when in 2013 I've seen for the first time that there was a huge gap of knowledge on the epidemiology of tinnitus, and this is why I decided to stop some other tasks I was conducting and to work specifically on this type of research on tinnitus. Actually, I don't work on treatment. I receive something like some calls from tinnitus patients sometimes.
Okay. Yeah.
And
yeah.
I'm so sorry that I can't help them. Not even promising.
You can send them to my podcast. Maybe they can find some consolation in my podcast. And I also do that is something that I do. I base my practice on cognitive behavioral therapy, which I have found is a very good way to reduce the THI score in the patients that I'm working with. I'm not a trained psychologist, but I have tinnitus, very severe tinnitus, for over 10 years myself, and I did a course in cognitive behavioral therapy, and I tried to alter the people's cognition or their perception of the tinnitus, and most of the time I gained good results. So after like 1 or 2 months with working with the people, they already perceive their tinnitus much less intrusive. However, of course, it's not a long-lasting tinnitus eradicating treatment, but at least it offers some help. Yeah.
No, now I'm involved also in this project, as I already mentioned, which is the Unity project, where a clinical trial will be conducted in multiple countries, and I will provide my contribution with the statistical analysis and with also the cost analysis. This is something of that could be very important, and therefore this is something new, and this is what I hope is to find a combined treatment that could at least alleviate the tinnitus severity and to improve quality of life of tinnitus patients.
Right. Yeah, well, I think you have already offered me much more of your time than we had originally planned. I'm very, very, very thankful for that. And again, super excited about this. I will, of course, share with you the results of this podcast episode. And maybe, now is the first one. Maybe in a year when I have a lot more other tinnitus episodes and you have new results to share, we can catch up again if you have time and interest in that. And then we could see on how my side of the coin is progressing and how you guys are doing.
But will you interview also other experts? Because for sure you will interview
Yes.
Winnie.
I am planning a collaboration with the University of Regensburg and Winnie Schlee. Also, and I'm sure you know her, Mrs. Rilana Cima from the University of Leuven and Maastricht University. And I'm trying to get a Skype call or an interview as well with her, but I think she's a very, very busy scientist. So if she's listening to this, Mrs. Chima, we can still make her interview, and I would be super glad to have her on here soon. And yes, in order to get all the different sides of the research on tinnitus, I would love this series of the podcast also to be about the different aspects and the different sides of research. So it's great that we could start with the epidemiological aspects, I think, to set the picture on what tinnitus is and how big it is. I think this has been a very, very, very interesting episode and a very interesting interview already. And I think it's great that we can set the view not only for the people who suffer from tinnitus, but also for the people who maybe don't know much about tinnitus yet. And I think that this has helped a lot to gain a picture and understanding of how big this actually is. And I would like to thank you very much again.
Thank you. And really, thank you for what you are doing, because I believe it is something important. So congratulations.
Thank you very much. It's from my heart, and it's something that's affected me a lot in my life. But it gives me sort of an empowerment and a lot of happiness of seeing how open it can also connect people, and that's something that makes me very, 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 very courageous for the future, and it makes me looking forward. And it's nice to see people connect over something that's not so nice.
Bravo. Okay.
All right. Thanks very much.
We keep in contact.
Thank you. Bye.
All right, so this was the interview with Professor Silvano Gallus from the Mario Negri Institute in Milan, Italy. I hope you thought it was interesting and you could learn a bit about the epidemiological aspects of tinnitus. In the next few coming weeks, I'll have a few other interesting things to share with you on my podcast, such as one of my good friends, Jonathan, is going to come on to the podcast, and he's going to talk about his experience with tinnitus, as well as some other people that I'll be interviewing in near future. So thanks very much for listening and for being here. And if you have any questions, you can always reach out to me. And until then, I wish you all the best as usual. If you have further questions, send me an email to fried@outringtinnitus.com. And otherwise, I would be very happy also to offer you a 45 minutes free coaching session. Just head to www.outringtinnitus.com to book it right there. And I'll be happy to help you out with your tinnitus as well. All right. Thanks, and speak to you soon. Ciao. Thank you very much for listening to the OUTRING TINNITUS podcast. I am looking forward to also welcome you on my website at outringtinnitus.com, or if you have any questions, please mail to frida@outringtinnitus.com. See you next time.